He went pale in seconds. Not angry, not defensive, just empty. And I remember thinking, so this is what truth looks like when it finally catches up to you. What surprised me wasn't what the doctor said. It was how calm I felt when I watched my husband realize he was exposed. If you're here because you think this is a story about revenge, it's not. If you're here because you think I screamed or cried or made a scene, I didn't. This is a story about silence, about waiting, and about what happens when someone assumes you're too weak to notice the truth. I'm telling you this because I know some of you are listening from hospital rooms, or from quiet kitchens late at night, or from cars where you sit longer than you need to just to avoid going inside. And maybe, like me, you once believed that love automatically meant loyalty. Let me take you back. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and cold air. That specific kind of cold that settles into your bones, no matter how many blankets they give you. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks, waiting for the anesthesiologist to come back, waiting for my husband to arrive. He never did. Instead, my phone buzzed once. A single message. I can't make it. Work exploded. You'll be fine, M. That was it. No call. No explanation. Just a period at the end of the sentence, like the conversation, like my fear, was already closed. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. The nurse asked gently if someone was coming to sit with me before surgery. I shook my head and said no. My voice didn't even crack. I surprised myself with that. They wheeled me down the hallway alone. Here's the part that still confuses people when I tell this story. I wasn't angry. I wasn't heartbroken. I felt alert, like something inside me had woken up. You see, this wasn't emergency surgery, but it wasn't cosmetic either. It was serious enough that the doctor had warned me about complications. Serious enough that most husbands would have canceled meetings, or at least pretended to care. Mine said he was too busy. As they prepared the for, I remember thinking, this is interesting. Not tragic. Not cruel, just revealing. Hours later, when I woke up groggy and dry-mouthed, the first thing I asked wasn't for my husband. It was for water. The second thing I asked was how long the surgery had taken. And the third thing I asked, the thing that mattered, was whether my husband had called. The nurse hesitated. That told me everything. Later that evening, while I was still under observation, I saw him walk into the room with that familiar rushed energy. Jacket still on, phone still in hand, apologetic smile already prepared. He kissed my forehead like it was a chore he'd nearly forgotten. I'm here now, he said. I nodded. I smiled. I said nothing. That's what people don't expect. They expect confrontation, tase, accusations. But I had already decided to watch. A little while after that, the doctor asked to speak with him privately. Just one question, he said. Nothing serious. I stayed in bed, listening to the sound of their footsteps fade down the hall. And when my husband came back, his face had changed completely. Not guilt, not fear of losing me, fear of being known. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because in that moment, I understood something very clearly. This wasn't about surgery. This was about everything that had been happening long before I ever stepped into that hospital. And if you stay with me, I promise you'll understand too. Before that day, before the hospital and the silence and the doctor's question, my life looked stable. Not perfect, just stable enough that I trusted it. My husband and I had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We met the way a lot of couples do now, nothing cinematic, nothing dramatic. A mutual friend's birthday dinner. We sat next to each other. We talked. We kept talking. It felt easy. That was always the word I used. Easy. He was charming in a quiet way. Not flashy. Not loud. He listened more than he spoke, which I mistook for depth. He had a good job. Ambitious without being reckless. He liked routines. I liked that too. At least, I thought I did. We built a life that looked right from the outside. A small house we stretched our budget for. Neutral-colored furniture. Weekend grocery trips. Friends who said things like, "You two are solid." I believed them. I worked freelance from home, which meant I was often there when he wasn't. I knew his schedule, or I thought I did. Morning meetings, late afternoons that bled into evenings, occasional business dinners. It all sounded reasonable, normal, even, and I trusted him. That's important to understand. I didn't suspect him. I didn't monitor his phone or check his emails or ask follow-up questions when plans changed. I believed that trust was something mature people practiced, not something anxious people questioned. Emotionally, I felt secure. Not wildly in love, not unhappy either. Comfortable, grounded, like I had chosen well. The surgery itself wasn't sudden. It had been scheduled weeks in advance. A necessary procedure, but not life-threatening. Still, the kind of thing where you expect your partner to show up, at least emotionally. When I told him the date, he nodded while scrolling through his phone. Said we'd figure it out. I remember noticing that phrase at the time. Figure it out. Not I'll be there. Not I'll take the day off. Just figure it out. I let it go. In the days leading up to the surgery, he was distracted. More than usual. His responses came a beat too late. His laughter felt slightly delayed, like it was buffering. When I talked about recovery time, about needing help the first day or two, he said, yeah, of course, without ever looking up. I told myself he was stressed. Work had been intense lately. He'd mentioned a big project, some internal pressure. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to be another demand. That was my role in our marriage. The understanding one. The flexible one. The night before surgery, we ate dinner on the couch. Some show playing in the background that neither of us was really watching. I asked him what time he'd be leaving work the next day. There was a pause. Just a fraction of a second too long. Not sure yet, he said. Why? I shrugged. Just wondering. Another pause. Longer this time. You'll be fine, he said. It's routine, right? I nodded, because it was easier than saying what I felt, that I wanted him there, that I needed to feel chosen just for one day. Instead, I went to bed early. He stayed up, typing on his laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting off the walls. I remember lying there, listening to the keys click, feeling strangely distant even though he was only a few feet away. Now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. The morning of the surgery, he kissed me quickly before I left. No good luck. No call me. Just a distracted goodbye, like I was heading out to run errands instead of into an operating room. Driving to the hospital alone, I told myself I was overthinking. That marriages go through phases. That not every moment needs to be a test of devotion. But as I parked and turned off the engine, I felt it again, that quiet internal alert. Not panic, not fear, awareness. At the time, I didn't know what it meant. I just knew something in my life was less solid than I'd believed. And I was about to find out how fragile normal really was. The first real doubt didn't come with shouting or discovery or proof. It came quietly, the way most truths do, disguised as inconvenience. When I checked in at the hospital that morning, they handed me a clipboard with forms and questions. Emergency contact. Spouse. Phone number. I filled it out automatically, the muscle memory of marriage doing the work for me. Then the intake nurse asked, "Will your husband be joining you before the procedure?" I hesitated. That pause wasn't for her. It was for me. "I think so," I said. And even as the words left my mouth, they felt borrowed. Not fully mine. They led me to a waiting area with soft lighting and those uncomfortable chairs designed to look calming. Around me, other patients sat with partners, parents, sisters. Someone held a woman's hand and whispered jokes. Someone else argued quietly over coffee. I sat alone. I checked my phone. Nothing. I told myself he was running late. Traffic. A meeting that went long. All reasonable explanations. All familiar ones. About 20 minutes later, I texted him. "I'm checked in. They'll take me back soon." The message showed as delivered. No response. Another 10 minutes passed. Then another. A nurse called my name and asked me to follow her. As we walked, she said gently, "If your support person arrives, we can bring them back before anesthesia." I nodded, even though something in my chest tightened. Not sadness, irritation. Like I'd been mildly inconvenienced by my own expectations. In the pre-op room, they handed me a gown and asked me to change. The door closed behind them, and for the first time, I was truly alone with my thoughts. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. I thought about the night before. The pauses in his voice. The way he hadn't asked what time the surgery actually was. The way he'd said "you'll be fine" instead of "I'll be there." I told myself I was being dramatic. Then my phone buzzed. For a split second, I felt relief. But it wasn't a call. Just a message. "Can't make it. Something came up at work. You'll be fine. I'll come by later." Later. I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no apology. No explanation beyond work. No recognition of what this moment might mean to me. Just certainty. Confidence. Closure. I stayed at the screen longer than I needed to. Not because I was hurt, but because my brain was catching up to something my body had already figured out. This wasn't an accident. If he had wanted to be there, he would have been. A nurse knocked and asked if I was ready. I said yes. My voice sounded steady. That surprised me. As she incited the four, she made small talk. Asked if someone would be waiting when I woke up. I said yes, because correcting her felt like more effort than lying. She smiled. Good. It helps. That's when it hit me, not emotionally, but logically. He hadn't even asked how long the surgery would take. I had told him the date, the hospital, the general idea, but not the timeline, and he hadn't cared enough to ask, which meant he hadn't planned to be around at all. That was the moment my instincts fully woke up. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I felt observant, like I'd stepped back from my own life and was watching it from a slight distance. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I made a quiet decision. Not a dramatic one, just a simple internal note. Don't confront. Don't accuse. Watch. People assume betrayal announces itself loudly, that it crashes into your life and demands attention. But this one whispered. It waited to see if I would notice, and I did. Before the anesthesia took over, I remember thinking one last thing. If this is who he is when I'm vulnerable, I need to know why. Pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted him right then, or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. Because as I drifted off, I had no idea that the answer would come sooner and more clearly than I ever expected, and that it wouldn't come from him at all. I woke up slowly, not in pain, not yet, just disoriented. The room felt dimmer than before, like the world had lowered its volume. A nurse noticed my eyes open and came over, her movements efficient but kind. Everything went well, she said. Just take a moment. I nodded. My mouth was dry. My limbs felt distant. Somewhere in the background, machines beeped softly, steady and indifferent. The first thing I noticed was the chair beside my bed. Empty. I didn't feel shocked. That's the strange part. It felt confirmed, like a final checkmark on a list I hadn't known I was making. A little while later, the doctor came in. He explained how the procedure had gone, what to expect during recovery, what symptoms were normal and which weren't. I listened carefully, asking questions, storing information. I was clear-headed in a way I hadn't expected. Then he asked, "Is your husband here?" I shook my head. He said he'd come later. The doctor paused. Not dramatically, just enough. "All right," he said. "We'll make sure someone goes over everything again when he arrives." Something in his tone shifted. Professional, still, but curious. Hours passed. My phone stayed silent. No updates. No check-ins. Nothing. By the time evening crept in through the small window, I had started to feel the pain. Not sharp, but heavy. A deep ache that reminded me I'd been cut open, rearranged, stitched back together. Still no husband. When he finally showed up, It was close to visiting hours ending. He walked in briskly, like someone arriving late to a meeting. He smiled too quickly, asked how I was doing before I could answer. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant physically. He sat down, checked his phone, made a comment about traffic. Then he leaned over and kissed my forehead. "I told you you'd be fine," he said. That sentence landed wrong. Not cruel, just wrong. Like he was congratulating himself. I watched him, the way he avoided my eyes, the way his foot bounced slightly, restless, the way he didn't ask what the doctor had said. We sat there like that for a few minutes. Quiet, separate. Then there was a knock. The doctor stepped back in. He smiled politely at me, then turned to my husband. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. "I just need to ask you one thing." My husband looked surprised. Sure." They stepped just outside the room. The door didn't fully close. I wasn't trying to listen. But when a room goes quiet, sound carries. The doctor's voice was calm, clear. "Has your wife been under unusual stress recently?" he asked. "Emotionally or otherwise?" There was a pause. I couldn't hear my husband's response. Just a low murmur. Another pause. Then the doctor spoke again. Because based on what we found, timing matters. And it helps to know whether there's been anything significant going on at home. That's when I sat up a little straighter. Timing. Stress. Home. The silence that followed was longer this time. And then I heard my husband say, very carefully, "I'm not sure what you mean." The doctor didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He simply said, "I mean, has there been anything in the past few months that might have affected her condition?" Another pause. I couldn't hear the answer, but I could imagine it. Vague, non-committal, safe. That's when the door opened again and they came back inside. My husband's face was different. Not panicked, not angry, pale. His mouth opened slightly, like he was about to say something, then closed again. He avoided looking at me. Sat down slowly. The doctor looked at me. "We'll talk more tomorrow," he said gently. "Get some rest." After he left, the room felt heavier. I turned my head and looked at my husband. What was that about? He hesitated. Too long. "Nothing," he said. "Just routine questions." I nodded. I didn't push, but something inside me dropped. Not broke, not shattered, just dropped, like an elevator suddenly losing a floor. Because in that moment, I understood something with absolute clarity. He knew. He knew more than he was telling me. And whatever the doctor had implied, it scared him. I need you to understand, this wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life collapsing. Have you ever been blindsided like this? If you've been there, share your story below. We heal better together. That night, after he left, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The pain meds dulled my body, but my mind was sharp. I replayed everything. The distractions, the absences, the way he'd emotionally stepped back long before the surgery. And for the first time, I let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding. What if he didn't just fail me that day? What if he had already been gone? The answer didn't hurt the way I expected. It hollowed me out. And at the very bottom of that hollow space, something new began to form, quiet, steady, and resolute. But I wasn't there yet. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up before the nurse came in. The pain was sharper now, more insistent, but it was manageable. What surprised me was how calm my mind felt, like it had settled into a decision I hadn't consciously made yet, but was ready to accept. My husband didn't text that morning. Not a "how are you feeling?" Not a "good morning." Nothing. Around 9, the doctor returned. This time, he pulled up a chair and sat closer to my bed. His tone was careful, respectful, the kind people use when they are about to say something that can't be unsaid. He explained the findings more clearly, without medical jargon, without drama. Stress, he said, can accelerate certain conditions. Prolonged emotional strain, instability, a body reacting to something the mind has been suppressing. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't point fingers, but he asked one question that stayed with me. Have you felt unsupported at home? I didn't answer right away. I thought about how many times I'd swallowed disappointment and called it maturity. How often I'd adjusted my expectations so I wouldn't feel let down. How I'd learned to be low maintenance so no one could accuse me of asking for too much. Yes, I said finally. I think I have. He nodded. Like that told him everything he needed to know. After he left, I stared at the wall and let the truth settle. Not about the surgery, but about my marriage. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication. This was absence. Consistent. Intentional. And once I named it, something shifted. I stopped wondering why he hadn't come. I stopped asking myself what I could have done differently. Instead, I started planning. Not revenge. Not confrontation. Clarity. I asked the nurse for my phone charger. I asked for copies of my medical notes. I asked questions about recovery time, physical limitations, follow-up appointments. I listened. I took notes. Control feels a lot like calm when you've been powerless for a long time. That afternoon, my husband finally showed up again. He brought coffee for himself, not for me. He asked how I was feeling, but his eyes kept drifting to the clock. I told him the doctor said stress may have contributed to my condition. He stiffened, just slightly. Oh, he said. Well, work's been crazy for both of us. For both of us. That's when I knew I wouldn't confront him. Not yet. Confrontation would give him a chance to explain, to minimize, to reshape the narrative into something survivable for him. I didn't want survival. I wanted truth. So I smiled. I nodded. I let him talk about deadlines and meetings and pressure. I asked gentle questions, neutral ones, the kind that invite people to keep going. He mentioned a colleague I didn't recognize, a project that had required late nights, a client dinner that happened more often than seemed necessary. I listened. When he left, he said he'd be busy the next day too. I said I understood. That night, alone again, I made a list in my phone. Not of accusations, of facts, dates he'd been unavailable, moments he'd been distant, times I'd felt small for wanting more. It wasn't emotional. It was logistical. Because somewhere between anesthesia and honesty, I'd realized something important. I didn't need to catch him. He had already shown me who he was. The only question left was how much I was willing to accept. By the end of that night, my decision was clear. I wasn't going to beg for presents. I wasn't going to compete with whatever had taken his attention. And I wasn't going to explode just to prove I was hurt. I would let the truth surface on its own. Because it always does. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. The next day, I was discharged. He was late picking me up. I didn't remind him. I didn't rush him. I just watched the clock. And I waited for the moment when he would finally realize that I wasn't waiting for him anymore. 2 days after I got home, the doctor called. Not my husband. Me. I was lying on the couch, pillows arranged carefully, pain manageable, mind sharp. When I saw the hospital number on the screen, I answered immediately. He didn't waste time. He told me there was something he hadn't been comfortable discussing in front of my husband. Not because it was catastrophic, but because it involved timing, patterns, and stress indicators that didn't line up with what he'd been told. Then he said it plainly. Emily, based on what we see medically, this didn't develop overnight. This has been building for months. And when I spoke to your husband, his answers didn't match the timeline. I closed my eyes. The doctor continued, careful but firm. He explained that when partners are present, their reactions, their concern, their awareness often provide context. My husband's absence, his confusion, his evasiveness, they weren't the reactions of someone closely involved, he said. More like someone out of sync. Out of sync. After the call ended, I didn't cry. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt focused. That evening, my husband came home late again. Tossed his keys on the counter. Asked how I was doing while scrolling through his phone. I said, the doctor called today. That got his attention. Oh, he said. Everything okay? He asked about stress, I replied. About the last few months. My husband froze. Not completely. Just enough. He also said, I added calmly, that your answers didn't line up. Silence. This is the moment everything changed. Be honest. Are you rooting for me right now, or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it. He sat down slowly, put his phone face down for the first time in weeks. What are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, I replied, my voice steady, that you weren't surprised when the doctor asked you about stress. You were scared. That's not. Don't, I said gently. Please don't insult me by pretending. He looked at me then, really looked, and something in his face shifted from defense to calculation. There it was. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse him of names or dates or people. I didn't need to. I was in surgery, I said, and you were somewhere else. That told me everything. He exhaled, long, heavy. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said. That sentence, that was the confession. I nodded. It never is. He started talking after that. Not all at once. In pieces. Carefully edited pieces. Emotional distance. A connection that just happened. Work stress. Feeling misunderstood. The usual excuses people use when they want absolution without accountability. I let him finish. Then I said, I'm not asking for details. I'm telling you I'm done. His head snapped up. Emily. No, I said, still calm. You made your choice when you decided your absence was acceptable. I'm just responding. He looked stunned. Not heartbroken. Not remorseful. Stunned that I wasn't negotiating. That I wasn't begging him to stay. That I wasn't louder. I'll be staying with my sister once I'm healed, I continued. We'll talk logistics through a lawyer. A lawyer. That word finally made it real. His face went pale again, just like it had in the hospital hallway. Because this time, there was no doctor between us. No closed door. No place to hide. Only truth. The weeks that followed moved slowly, but not painfully. Recovery has a way of forcing stillness. I spent long mornings on the couch, sunlight shifting across the room, my body healing in quiet increments. I followed the doctor's instructions, took my medication, went to follow-up appointments alone. My husband moved through the house like a guest. Careful, polite, distant. We didn't fight. There were no late-night arguments or slammed doors. Just conversations about logistics. Who would take what? When I'd leave? What paperwork needed signing? The emotional part had already happened. He tried, once or twice, to reframe things. To talk about therapy. About how stress had confused him. About how my surgery had been a wake-up call. I listened. I didn't engage. Because the truth was simple. If it took my vulnerability to make him notice me, then he had never truly been present. When I was strong, he drifted. When I was weak, he disappeared. That pattern was enough. I moved out a month later, stayed with my sister at first, then found a small apartment of my own. Nothing fancy, just quiet, just mine. The first night there, I slept better than I had in years. Not because the pain was gone, but because the uncertainty was. What I lost was the life I thought I had. The version of marriage I'd defended to friends. The future I'd assumed would just continue unfolding if I stayed patient enough. What changed was me. I stopped shrinking my needs to fit someone else's limitations. I stopped interpreting absence as stress and neglect as misunderstanding. I learned that being calm doesn't mean being silent, and being strong doesn't mean enduring everything. What remained surprised me. My confidence. My clarity. My ability to sit with discomfort without folding. The doctor was right. Stress had been part of it. But it wasn't just work stress or timing or bad luck. It was the stress of being emotionally alone while technically married. That kind of loneliness leaves a mark. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that my husband was shocked by how quickly I'd moved on. How cold I'd been. How he never thought I'd actually leave. I didn't correct them. Let him believe what he needed to believe. I didn't leave to punish him. I left to protect myself. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. Because here's the quiet truth no one tells you. Healing doesn't feel triumphant. It feels spacious. It feels like finally having room to breathe. I don't hate him. I don't miss him. I respect the version of myself who noticed the truth and didn't look away. And that's enough. If you're still listening, I want to talk to you directly now. Not as someone with answers, but as someone who learned them the hard way. There's a difference between being patient and being abandoned, between trusting someone and erasing yourself to keep the peace. Love isn't proven in grand gestures. It shows up in the quiet moments, the inconvenient ones, the times when staying costs more than leaving. When my husband chose not to be there during my surgery, it wasn't just about that day. It was a pattern revealing itself, one I'd been protecting him from by staying silent. And silence can look like strength, until it starts hurting you. You don't need permission to expect presence. You don't need proof dramatic enough to justify walking away. And you don't owe anyone your health, physical or emotional, in exchange for comfort. So here's my final question. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Emily Parker's voice travels. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave quietly and live loudly in your own peace.